You're listening to Halfway There, honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. Episode number 149, David Jacob and Seeking After God. My friends, and welcome to another episode of Halfway There. This is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. I, of course, am your humble host, Eric Nevins. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you listening as always. Hey, if you are not yet on our mailing list, you can get on there at halfwaytherepodcast.com. I usually send out an email every single Monday just to let you know that the episode is out for the week and keep you up to date on whatever it is that I am doing in the meantime. There's a lot of things that are going on. I'm still working on some 8-day experiences. I'm also out there going on other people's shows and sharing the message of Halfway There that, hey, no matter where you are, you are on a journey and you'll never be all the way there. So you may as well appreciate being where you are right now. Friends, I can't wait to introduce you to our guest today. He serves as the missionary in residence and the chair of the intercultural studies department at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School in Ellendale, North Dakota. So we talk a little bit about that, kind of how he got there. He also wrote a book called It's Your Call to a Missional or Missionary Life. Very interesting. We talk a lot about what are we focused on and where are you headed. It's pretty easy to focus on how do we know God's will, and yet sometimes maybe there's something else that we should be pursuing, and we're going to talk all about that. So really interesting story and conversation today. My guest is David Jacob. Friends, here is that conversation. David, welcome to Halfway There.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be here today.
It is great to have you as well. I know we got a chance to connect a little while ago, and I love kind of the work that you're doing. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and where God has you now, and then we'll go back and fill in all the backstory.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a husband and a dad. We have 5 kids. Our oldest is just married last summer, and we've got kind of all the age spans down to about 8 years old. So we keep busy, and I've been the missionary in residence here at Trinity Bible College and Graduate School in North Dakota for about 4 years now. And before that, we were missionaries to a sensitive country in Northern Asia. And so, kind of a long journey about how God, called us into missionary work. But I love working with students here at Trinity and just being able to mentor, to disciple, to teach, and to mobilize the next generation of missionaries to the field.
That's an interesting title. Missionary in residence. Like what? So what do you do if you're a missionary in residence?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a neat program that the Assemblies of God has where we can take a missionary off the field for a short amount of time. Usually it's 1 to 2 years. My situation is a little bit different where they've asked me to be here longer than that, but still temporary. And so I am here to kind of bring the practical side of missions to the campus. So missions changes so fast. And a lot of our missions programs at Christian universities or Bible colleges kind of criticized for maybe teaching things how they used to be. And so it's a great program where missionaries can come off the field for a short amount of time and really say, hey, here's what the textbook says. And it kind of used to be that way. This is more how I see it playing out in my experience, or just really trying to inspire and bring those recent stories from the field right into the classroom as we're teaching and mobilizing students to the mission field.
Yeah, very interesting, because it does seem that the world is always changing, right? So why our methods and the way we approach people also have to change as we go. And so I love that, even bringing stories from that are happening right now. I'll tell you, one of the most impactful things that happened to me. In my MDiv, I only had to take one missions class because that wasn't my area of focus. But there was a guy named Tony Weeder. I actually had him on the show a while back. Okay. He taught some of the classes. He told us stories about how Muslims were having dreams of Jesus. I guess this is still going on. Mm-hmm. And that was so impactful to me. So I know that hearing those stories, like, of what's happening now, like, that totally changed the way I thought about how God thinks about those people, right?
Right.
Really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really powerful. And just to be here to mentor and to disciple, students, a lot of the younger generations, they're wanting a mentor. And for those going into missionary work, there's so many questions. So to be able to have a practitioner here on campus to help walk through the calling and to help develop the call of some of these students is a real joy for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I can see a lot of value there. I don't know if most colleges, Christian colleges or universities have such a thing, but if they don't, it sounds like they should.
Yeah. I think a good number of them do. It's a great initiative.
Very neat. I love it. Okay, well, let's find out more about how God has led you to this place. So, you're in North Dakota now, but where are you from? Are you?
Yeah, I'm originally from Indiana.
Okay.
I kind of grew up in a small town in Indiana. My folks had a lake house, and so I grew up kind of on the lake, jumping off the boathouse in the summertime. Nice. And doing all the yard work, and so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So was it a Christian family, or were you?
Yeah, not? My folks were kind of nominal Christians, and that the Calvary Baptist Church bus would come by my house, and so they were saw the need for us kids to get that Christian education, and so we would go to church. And I remember accepting the Lord as a 6-year-old, but as my childhood wore on, my parents were divorced, and I really wasn't living for the Lord until about my freshman year in high school. A friend invited me to youth group, and it was there that I rededicated my life to Jesus, and from then was really kind of called into ministry. So I've been in ministry all my life.
Wow. Well, tell us about that moment when you gave your life to Christ again, or rededicated your life, or however you want to say that. Like, what was it? Like, what were the circumstances? Like, just tell us that story.
Sure. Yeah. So it was a Wednesday night youth group at an Assembly of God church, and the pastor was talking about God's will for your life. Which is interesting because I bring that up in the book a lot, that whole topic of what's God's will for me. And the Spirit I could just sense God's Spirit. And I really felt like I know that God's will is for me to come back to Him. And so it was there at the altar after that service where that youth pastor prayed for me. And I said, I want to rededicate my life to Christ. And so after that, he really took me under his wing. I'm so thankful for him, for my youth pastor who did that. He discipled me. He not only informally, but formally, he took me through a workbook, and really poured into my life. So many days after school, I would go to church, and it would just be the two of us. I would help him with various projects around the church, or to get ready for the next Wednesday night. But really it was a discipleship time. So I would go on hospital visits with him, and it was just an apprenticeship almost. And so for several years after Bible college, I did spend as a youth pastor. And so that's just, it really is helpful for me in my work and what I do here at Trinity, even today, that ministry experience.
I love that, because it's so powerful when you have somebody in the faith who invests in you, right? And who's able to, take you through those things. I love that, even taking you on hospital visits and showing you, hey, this is what ministry is like. This is where he must have thought you were called. Did he already think you had some calling?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very soon after I rededicated my life to him, it was pretty evident to the senior pastor, to the youth pastor, and to myself that God had ministry in mind for me and for my life.
Well, how was it evident? Like, what were the markers? Like, what did they go, oh, that's definitely, yeah.
That's a good question. I'm not sure what they saw. I just remember many times, even on Sunday mornings at the altar after service, that the pastor would come up, and I think I would be so moved by what God was doing in me. The pastor would pray, David, God's got something special planned for you. He's got a special calling on your life, and I resonated with that, but I don't know if I could really put my finger on exactly what it was, except this desire to know Jesus more. And I just really couldn't imagine doing anything else full time with my life except for vocational ministry. And I know that's not for everybody, but for me, it was just such a sense of I've got to spend the rest of my days in trying to see people come to Christ and discipling them like my youth pastor had done for me.
Yeah, so it sounds like a burning fire, like a passion. Is it one of the prophets says, fire my bones, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, man, it is. And ministry is so fun. I've never had more fun in ministry than I am right now. It's just such a blast to be here and to work with students and to train and to mobilize and to inspire them. It's it's just a joy. You're investing in more than what you can do yourself, right? I mean, we could be on the field right now sharing Jesus with the unreached and with the lost, and we love that, and there's a great need for that. But during this season, I get to be here at Trinity and investing in the lives of others and multiplying myself in that way. So we've got several students who are on the field as a direct result of us taking them on a short-term trip or us mentoring them or teaching them. And so it's that legacy kind of that we're leaving behind. Even though I'm still in my 40s, I'm not that old, really.
Right? But, preach it.
Yeah. But it's that investing into the next generation and seeing them rise up into ministry when there's fewer and fewer going into ministry today. So it's really a discipleship and multiplying ourselves during this season. And we're just so thankful.
Yeah, well, that helps me make a little bit of sense of it, because you had a really great example of someone who invested in you and showed you kind of this is the way you want to go, or this is what that's like. So powerful. Interesting. I resonate with that. I'm a little jealous because I had some people who were interested, but I don't know, maybe traditional ministry wasn't really the direction for me. So
sure.
But that's cool. So all right, so you're investing, and doing the ministry with your youth pastor, and then you said you ended up going to Bible school.
Yeah. I went to a North Central Bible College in Minneapolis. It's one of our sister schools here in the Assemblies of God, and trained for youth ministry with a minor in pastoral studies. And then after graduation, I went right into youth ministry in the Twin Cities. Okay,
great. And so what was your experience with God in those periods of time? Like, do you remember something? Actually, I was going to ask you this question earlier. So you said you went through that workbook. Like, is there anything that you learned during that period of time that just like stands out to you about God as you were kind of learning about who God is and learning about how you relate to him? Like, maybe it was during that time with the youth pastor or later in college, but like anything, do you have any stories about how that stands out?
I was just amazed at, I was so immature, I guess, looking back, and was just so amazed that that God cared about me so much, and that this youth pastor cared about me to invest in me like that. And sometimes it's the practical things. I remember we were driving to one hospital visit. One of the girls in our youth group had leukemia, and she ended up passing away, actually. But we were going to visit her in the hospital one day, and I wasn't saying a whole lot, and he said, David, you need to learn to ask questions. You need to learn to be a better conversationalist, and that just sticks out in my mind because it was a little bit of a teaching moment,
Yeah.
But I needed that in order, because ministry is all about people. And if we don't develop our people skills, we're going to have a rough time in ministry. And so just that outpouring of love and care for me by both him and God that really ministered to me and taught me some important things in those formative, immature years. Of course, there were a lot of ups and downs through college. I wasn't the greatest student, which is kind of ironic. In fact, at one point I told the Lord, I'm never going back to school.
Wow.
And now here I am teaching and working towards a PhD. So
yes.
God definitely has a sense of humor.
I love that. What's the who was it that said God makes plans, or man makes plans, God laughs? I forget. That was like one of the saints or something. But.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just so thankful that God has saved me, that God forgives me, that he puts up still with my immaturity sometimes and my sin, that he forgives that. And so just living a thankful, kind of living the dream right now, and just so excited, both in just professionally, but also in my family life and personally. God is just amazing, and we're so thankful.
Yeah. So how did you end up on the mission field? So you were a youth pastor for a while.
Yeah, I was youth pastor for a while. I did that for about 4 years, and then I went to work for Operation Christmas Child,
cool.
project of Samaritan's Purse, which sends sends shoeboxes all around the world. So I was the director of the Upper Midwest area for Operation Christmas Child for many years. And so we would go on different distribution trips all around the world. I've been to Kosovo and Panama and Honduras and Ecuador, just distributing shoebox gifts. And so it was during that time that God started to just give me a burden to always be on the front lines of ministry and of missions. And so I kind of had this thought that, I wonder if God's calling me onto something else, but not really sure what it was. And I entered into this very difficult, dark time of my life where I was asking God, what's next? And he was very silent.
Wow.
And I was really frustrated. And this went on for months and months of, God, what do you want me to do? I feel this nudge to do something else, but it felt like my prayers were bouncing off the ceiling. And, I inspected my life and is there sin? Is there, what is happening here? And it just went on for months. And one day I was sitting in my office at work, and I was so frustrated with God. And I said, God, I don't understand why you're not speaking. You know that we will go anywhere. You know that we will do anything. But this silence is, I just don't understand it. And I'm not a guy who gets a lot of visions in my life, but this particular day I did. I saw this image in my mind of me driving a car, and Jesus was sitting in the passenger seat. And I was saying, where do you want us to go? Just tell us. We'll take this car anywhere. We'll run a red light for you. We'll do anything that you want us to do. But you've got to speak. And God said, Jesus turned in this vision. He turned to me and he said, you know what I'd really like? I'd like to switch seats and let's just get to know each other better.
Wow.
And it was in that moment, Eric, that I was like, oh man, I have been seeking God's will instead of seeking God himself. Wow. And that's wrong of me to do. And so I think it's admirable that we say yes to Jesus and be available to do anything he asks us to do. But when we're so consumed with God's will and when we're not consumed with him, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I write about this in the book a little bit that you referred to. I tell this story and just how we've got to get back to, especially as young people, I think, to seeking God instead of seeking His will, and it's in that seeking Him that He shares His will with us.
Right. Yeah, there's a reason why Jesus says, "Seek first the kingdom of God." Right?
Yeah,
Seek Him
exactly.
first. Wow, I love that. What a great statement. Jesus obviously he has a way with words, but I think
Yeah.
I just what a great reminder that hey, no, God is what we're after. God is what we're after.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So how did that change your life?
Yeah. So, man, it really shifted my focus. And for months, intentionally, my wife and I intentionally sought Jesus. We would schedule prayer time into our calendars together. We would schedule Bible studies and devotions, both individually and together as a couple. We put these into our calendars, and one August we decided to take a prayer and Bible study retreat for just the two of us, and we got away to do nothing else but to seek the Lord. And it was during that time, that retreat, where we were journaling and we were kind of teaching one another about the Bible and praying together to just seek Jesus. It was during that time we came away saying, I wonder if He's calling us to be missionaries in Asia. And at the same time, we were in the adoption process, adopting our daughter from Asia. And so that was all kind of, we were learning about her birth culture, and so that was all kind of working at the same time. And we talked to some pastor friends of ours that we really respected. And we said, we kind of told them our story and said, we think this is where God's leading us. Are we crazy, or do you kind of sense God's doing something here? And they confirmed that yeah, God was indeed doing something. And so we just began to take those small steps, one after another, talking to people and putting in an application and doing the interviews and asking all the questions. And so we were thankful that we had good missionary friends that kind of walked alongside of us, and really served as mentors to us again as we investigated this as a possibility. And so we did end up going overseas as missionaries.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. So I'm really fascinated by the a couple of times you've had some really interesting points of discernment in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, I mean, even just asking God the question, hey, why aren't you speaking to me? Right. And then being willing to you have this vision of Jesus and being willing to go, oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
And accept it, because I don't know that all of us do, right?
Right.
And then also then having the moment of discerning. I think God is calling us to Asia, even though, I mean that's a tough decision, right? So it's kind of bring all these things together that you were doing.
Right. Yeah, it was a tough decision, and we were in our 30s with two small kids, about to adopt our third child, and so with the two older ones were biological, but our third one was the adoption there. And so, yeah, it was a tough decision to sell the house, to, of course, move literally halfway across the world away from family. And so it's a big deal. And it took quite a lot of time and planning and praying and just, again, seeking God in all things.
Yeah. Okay, so you decide to do this, and you go over, like, what was that process like, and what was it like when you got there?
Yeah, so we went with Assembly of God World Missions, and so we made application with them and went through an interview process, went through some training, and of course we traveled and spoke at a lot of different churches, and we did a lot of fundraising. We really prioritized ministry and hoping to mobilize others as we fundraised, and so we learned a lot. We're able to minister a lot there.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a student here who's a student now that we met years ago at an event that we held as we were itinerating and fundraising, and now she's a student here. So it's been a pretty interesting journey. So when we got to Asia, of course, we had these some missionary friends of ours who showed us the ropes. We didn't know how to buy food and how to pay our water bill, and we didn't really have the language. So we spent 2 years studying the language and then working with orphans in the country where we lived.
Okay, so I want to go back to this, because is there anything that you learned about fundraising and like that whole process that would be helpful for people? Because I think, that's one of the things that holds people back sometimes is going, hey, I don't really want to do that, or I don't know how to do that. Like what?
You're absolutely right. And I said the exact same thing. There was one point where I said, Lord, I'll go be a missionary, but there's no way I'm fundraising. And I think we see it as a daunting task that we have to do to get to our real ministry. And I don't think that's the right outlook. Fundraising and going to speaking to other Christians, whether it be at churches or businesses or in homes, is an incredible privilege to promote the cause of missions and to promote God's kingdom. And so, when we focus on ministry and what we can give to that congregation instead of how much money we can get from them, God does amazing things, not only in their lives and our lives, but in our funding as well. Our funding has always come in. We've always been provided for. So I was just talking yesterday with a guy from the UK, actually, who's wanting to go into missions. He was asking me, he's like, do you have any advice for fundraising? And so, because it can be really intimidating, but if we just shift our thinking a little bit into, this is an opportunity. My main goal here is to minister, to pour into the lives of others, and to mobilize others from the congregation. And so I've had a 63-year-old lady come up to me after the service and in tears say, I'm about to retire and I don't want to waste my life anymore. How can I go overseas? Wow. And so it's moments like that in that fundraising process that can really make an impact. And you know what? God blesses that kind of kingdom thinking, and he is faithful to bring our funds in.
Wow. That is so just absolutely incredible. So to take the perspective of your ministry starts now.
Yeah, missionaries are always ministers, whether you're at home or you're on the field overseas. So as missionaries are traveling and itinerating, it's not about how much they can get so that they can get back to their real ministry. It's about, what can I pour into this congregation as I'm on my journey back to the field that God has called me. But God has called you here for today. So wherever you are, that's God's will for your life.
Yes.
And be a minister there.
I can see where that could go a very cynical kind of way, right? Like, I've got to do this in order to keep the people happy so they'll give me money or whatever, right? So I can do the other thing. Right. But that seems like a really healthy way to think about it of, hey, I'm ministering whether I'm here, whether I'm there, wherever I am. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love it. Wow, that's a great insight, brother. Thank you.
And it makes it so much fun. You know? Because you're there pouring into others, and you can go to the kids church and you can inspire them. Most people are called to the missions field between the ages of 4 and 15. And so we've got this window here of children and youth. And so if we had more missionaries who were going into children's church and going into youth group to inspire and mobilize and teach and to just, help thrust the next generation of missionaries to the field. Oh man, can you imagine what would happen with our U.S. missionary force if we had that kind of attitude?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think interesting. Okay. Well, that's good. So I have so many thoughts, but we can't go everywhere with all of them. I want to get back to your story. So, that was a really great insight. So so you get there, you fundraise, you get there, you're starting to learn the language, you're learning all of the things, which has got to be interesting when you're doing it in an Asian culture, because it's a whole different kind of world than we do have in our Western world.
Right.
Did you learn to read some of those?
I did.
Some of it. Wow.
Yeah. I learned to read and write and speak and listen. So I was in a comprehensive class. And I love learning new things. As missionaries, I think we should all, as Christians, really love learning. And so I just tried to soak up everything I could about that language.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us about that time over there and what you can and what was interesting and what you learned about God there.
Yeah. So, I remember writing in my journal that dependence on him has to be the norm every hour.
Wow.
Because it was such a difficult context that we were living in, and it was a little bit risky. And so we really learned to depend upon God. And, I didn't do everything perfectly. There was a lot that I would have changed, but God really taught us so much. And it was while I was there. I was washing eggs one day, which is not something we normally do in the States, but
right.
We got our eggs from the market, and they were fresh in every sense of that term. And so,
okay, I'm imagining, yes.
So you've got to wash them before you can crack them open. And so I'm washing eggs one day, and I said, I just had this desire to teach, and like, Lord, what is this? I don't have a master's degree. And so as the days went on, I could not stop thinking about teaching an intro to missions class. And I'm like, this is crazy, but man, that would be so much fun. And so I'm such a nerd that I Googled intro to missions syllabus, just to see what people were teaching and to just try to learn. And I'm like, what is going on here? And so it was time for us to come home again. And we were on furlough here in the States. And I remember mowing the lawn and just going, I love what we're doing, but I have got to teach. And so I talked to my supervisor about it. And he said, well, we've got this missionary in residence program. Why don't you apply? And I said, I don't even have a master's degree. I mean, I can't go to a college and teach. And he said, well, sometimes they're looking for, other people to do other tasks. So why don't you just give it a shot? And I did. And Trinity, long story short, Trinity Bible College here in North Dakota called, and they said, hey, we're interested in establishing a Go Trip program where we send all of our students overseas every single year on a short-term mission trip. Could you come and help us establish this? And I said, oh man, that is the job for me. Let's do it. So
wow.
That's really what brought us here.
That's cool. So they send every student overseas. Is it every year or?
Every year. So if you're a student here, regardless of your major, we've got 9 or 10 different trips that are led by our staff and faculty, who again mentor you and pour into you as you're traveling, as you're on this trip. But yeah, every single on-campus student goes. We literally close down the college for a week in March. It's the week before spring break, so you still get your spring break. And we send all of our. We basically say, okay, we've taught you in the classroom. Now let's go put some of this into practice.
Yeah.
So every year you're applying what you're learning in the classroom to a real life context. And a lot of our trips are here in the States, but we have many that are overseas as well.
Wow. Very cool. I love the way that takes what can be very theoretical, right? Very kind of in your head, and puts it in the real world. Because we all know it doesn't matter the discipline. It can be Bible, it can be ministry, it can be, English or, machine shop, right? Whatever it is one thing to know stuff. Is a different thing to do things.
Right.
And so that's a really great, it also, to take a whole week out of your semester demonstrates a real global commitment, right? It demonstrates it's a real investment.
It is. And so I'm really thankful for the leadership of our president and our administration here, who see ministry and missions as a priority. And so they're willing to, have that week where we're putting our learning into practice. And it's great because then, whether or not we did well putting our learning into practice or not, we come back and we evaluate that. And that helps our learning. So the praxis affects the theology, and the theology affects the praxis. So it's the cyclical cycle, right? Of learning, experimenting, learning experience and doing it, coming back and evaluating and assessing. And that's the way we learn the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'm just really struck at how you were very attuned to the desire to teach, and you're questioning, right? You're asking God, and you're going, okay, what is that? What's that about?
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out how this was going to work because I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah.
So to come, I was very intimidated to come onto campus, especially without a master's degree, and to just be here. But I've been able, since I've been here, to finish a master's degree and to now start a PhD. So, but yeah, so many of us have questions, and there are times when we don't understand sometimes the desires that God puts in our hearts, or what the next steps are. And it's so important to seek Him in all things, and to talk about it to those in ministry that you know and that you trust, to help them so that they can help you kind of navigate this. So life on life, this is part of discipleship, and us being discipled is asking those questions of people that we respect. So don't be afraid to do that. It's really important.
Totally agree. And I would argue it was the Holy Spirit saying that to you, putting this bug in your ear, just this desire in your heart to go, okay, I want you to be ready when the time comes.
Exactly.
And so that you could say something like, that's the job for me. I can't wait to go do this. Like that is just beautiful. Friends, I just want to echo Dave's statement there. Like, don't, when you have those thoughts, because we all have them. I know you have them. So when you have those thoughts or those ideas or something, especially if you can't shake it, but even if it's a fleeting thought, just take it to the Lord and say, what is that? Is that something I should follow? Is it something I should not follow? And then, I trust Him, and you should trust Him too, to just take it further as He wants, right? So you just put it into His hands, but
exactly,
don't dismiss it. Don't just let it go. But especially if you think it's something God might want you to do, even if you don't understand it, like Dave did.
Yeah, exactly. So good.
Wow, I love that. Wow. Okay. So you've been there, and then you wrote this book called "It's Your Call to Be Missional or a Missionary," right?
Yeah. So the missionary task is not only for missionaries, and the Great Commission is a command to the disciples to go and to make disciples of all nations, all people groups. And so I wanted to kind of explain that that there is a role for you as a Christian in the Great Commission. Every believer has a role to play in the Great Commission. And so I wanted to write something that would help the younger generations, or anyone really, to kind of try to discover what that is. And so we highlight prayer and Bible study as the number one thing. We've already talked about seeking God instead of seeking His will. And so you combine that with Bible reading, is how God often speaks to us. And part of my wife's calling to the mission field was because she was reading Romans 10, and the Holy Spirit really spoke to her about being the one who goes and who tells. So we highlight prayer and Bible study, a missionary mentorship. Again, if there are those, you feel like maybe I'm called to the field, try to find a missionary mentor. Ask around those missionaries that come through your church. Try to have a conversation with them after the service, and keep in touch with them. See if they'll be willing to do that. Most of them are. And so by text or by Skype as they travel, you can be in touch with them. And then I encourage everyone to go on a short-term mission trip. I think every believer should go on at least one short-term trip in your lifetime to just expand your worldview, to be in a place where you're experiencing missions, and to really just seek God about, what is my role in this Great Commission? There's so many unreached people groups left, people that haven't even heard about Jesus once for the first time. And so if we all work together as senders and givers and mobilizers and encouragers, and those that pray and those that send care packages to missionaries to help keep us there, to encourage us, right? Pastors who, preach about missions, and all the way from Genesis to Revelation, how God has this thread of wanting the nations to come to know him throughout the whole Bible. Do these things to help find your role in the Great Commission.
Yeah, and what a privilege, right? I mean, if this is God's aim in history, and I think you're right, it's arguably what God wants. He's bringing people to himself. He says, I will be their God, and they will be my people, and it's people from every nation, tribe, and tongue.
Yeah.
What a privilege to be part of it.
The fact that God chooses to partner with little old me and us, in all of our weakness and all of our sin, that he partners with us and chooses to. He doesn't have to set it up that way, but he does. He gives the command to us to do this, is so incredibly satisfying and humbling that it just makes me be so in awe of God that we get to partner with him to share his love, his power, his fame with the nations is so incredible.
Yeah, I love that. And so your book will help people discern that and figure that out. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. We just want to kind of lay that out to help people discover what's my role in the Great Commission. So you're either missionary or you're missional, meaning that you're either the missionary who goes crossing cultures to share Jesus, or you're that missional person who is all about outreach and ministry and support and sending, all those things that we've discussed.
Yeah. So you're involved in the Great Commission one way or the other. I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, friends, I've got links to It's Your Call to a Missional or Missionary Call on the website at halfwaytherepodcast.com. As usual, you guys know how to get there if you're looking for that. Man, David, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate that. What, anything you want to leave us with?
I think I just want to emphasize the importance of being involved in missions in some way. The numbers of missionaries that we're sending from America, from North America, are in drastic decline. We lose about 7% of our U.S. missionary force every single year. And so fewer and fewer people are choosing a missionary career. And we've got to say, hey, we want more missionaries who are out there telling people about Jesus. So how can I be involved? You may not be the one to go, but you might be the one to inspire that young person in your church. Or you might be that wealthy businessman or businesswoman who can say, hey, I'm going to support missionaries by doubling the finances that I give for the cause of the Great Commission, to make let's make Jesus famous over all the earth. And it so burdens me that there are still countless people all around the world that have never heard of him, let alone understand his fame, his power, and his salvation.
Yeah, I'm always astounded by that when you see like the planes that fly over Brazil or someplace, and there's these tribes that are going, "What the heck's that thing?" And nobody's talked to them. That like they're and at least now we know about disease, right? So we can like be careful not to do things like that. So there's concerns, but they still need the gospel, right? Yep. So interesting, David. I love that. I think that's a great encouragement to somebody listening. I know somebody out there. Maybe God's calling you to a missionary life, and if that's you, don't be afraid of it. You know what? We're changing. Methods are changing. Everything. And here's the reality. We're seeing the fruit today. This is something that inspires me, so I want to share it with you guys. Yeah. We're seeing the fruit today of the missionary work that was done in Asia and Africa in the last century, right? In the 19th century and the 20th century. Today, like 100 years later or better, we're seeing it. There's so many Christians in Africa and Asia because of those people who are willing to go. And South America too, right? So, but there's other places around the world, and still in those places, maybe like Europe, for instance, where that's just not the case. And so, the investments that we make now we'll have fruit. You may not see it. We may not see it. Our great grandchildren might see it, right?
Right.
And see what God has done. But we have to take a long view, because I think God invites us to a long view, and be ready for that. So make those investments, maybe with your life.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, David, thanks so much for being here. I sure appreciate you sharing your story, and I love the work that you're doing. I love what God's doing in your life. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. It's been great to talk with you.